Before the mountains rose, and before the forests breathed, there was only Ymir, the primordial giant, born from the meeting of fire and ice in the yawning void of Ginnungagap. When Odin and his brothers Vili and Ve slew this first being and carved the cosmos from his corpse, they fashioned the earth from his flesh, the seas from his blood, mountains from his bones. But in that cooling meat, in the rotting substance of the giant's body, something stirred, something small, something that would change the fate of gods and men forever. The Prose Edda tells us that, from the decaying flesh of Ymir, creatures emerged, not born, but generated spontaneously from corruption itself. The Völuspá describes them forming like maggots in the earth. These were the first dwarves, writhing things without form or purpose, beings of pure potential dwelling in the stone and soil that had once been a giant's body. But the gods, seeing something useful in these creatures, granted them human-like shapes and something far more dangerous: intelligence. They gave consciousness to the dark, and the dwarves opened their eyes for the first time beneath a sky they could never fully see. The first among them was Gungnir, whose name means frenzy inciter, followed by Durin, the sleepy one. These became the leaders, the progenitors of dwarvish society in the subterranean realm that would be known by two names: Nidavellir, the Dark Fields, and Svartalfheim, home of the Black Elves, for the Norse sources blur the line between dwarves and dark elves so thoroughly that they may well be the same beings viewed through different lenses. Snorri Sturluson lists dozens of dwarf names in his Edda, a genealogy of beings born not from coupling but from the very substance of creation itself. And here's something rarely mentioned in popular retellings. 4 of these dwarves were given a task that would make them cosmic pillars, literally. Norðri, Suðri, Austri, and Vestri, north, south, east, and west, were placed at the 4 corners of the world to hold up Ymir's skull, which the gods had fashioned into the dome of heaven. Every time you look at the sky in Norse cosmology, you're seeing architecture supported by 4 dwarf brothers, straining under the weight of creation itself, forever holding up the ceiling of the world. They are simultaneously the most important beings in the cosmos and the most forgotten, condemned to a task that allows for no glory, no rest, no recognition beyond their names becoming directions. This is the paradox of the dwarves from their very inception: essential yet marginalized, creators of wonders yet dwelling in darkness, granted intelligence by gods who would then use them as laborers. They live in the spaces between earth and stone, between ally and enemy, between benefactor and threat. And in that liminal space, they became the most skilled artisans in all the 9 realms. The legends say that dwarves possess an understanding of craft that surpasses even the gods themselves. While Odin might claim wisdom and Thor might wield strength, neither could forge the weapons that would define them. For that, they needed the hands that shaped stone in darkness, the minds that understood the secret geometries of metal and magic. The dwarves mastered not just metalwork, but the fundamental art of creation, the transformation of raw matter into objects of power that could alter the course of fate itself. The most famous tale of dwarvish craftsmanship begins, as so many Norse tales do, with Loki's malicious mischief. The trickster god, in one of his crueler pranks, crept into the bedchamber of Sif, Thor's wife, renowned throughout the realms for her golden hair, and sheared her locks while she slept. When Thor discovered the violation, his rage shook the halls of Asgard. He seized Loki by the throat and would have crushed every bone in the trickster's body had Loki not promised to replace Sif's hair with something even more magnificent. Desperate, Loki descended into Svartalfheim, into the caverns where firelight danced on walls of living rock. There, he sought out the sons of Ivaldi, master craftsmen whose reputation echoed even in the realm of gods. He begged them for new hair for Sif, and the sons of Ivaldi, perhaps amused by the plight of gods brought low by their own follies, agreed. But they didn't stop with hair. They crafted 3 treasures, strands of pure gold that would grow naturally on Sif's head. Gungnir, the spear that never missed its mark, for Odin, and Skidbladnir, a ship that could be folded small enough to fit in a pocket, yet carried all the Aesir when unfurled, and always found favorable winds. Here's where Loki's nature betrayed him again. Rather than accepting these gifts gratefully and departing, he couldn't resist boasting to another pair of dwarf brothers he encountered. Brokkr and Sindri, sometimes called Atri. Loki proclaimed that the sons of Ivaldi were the greatest craftsmen in all the realms, and that no one, certainly not these two brothers, could create works of equal magnificence. The brothers bristled at the insult, and Loki, feeling cocky, made a wager. If they could create 3 items superior to those made by the sons of Ivaldi, they could take his head. If they failed, they would receive nothing but embarrassment. Brokkr and Sindri accepted. They set to work in their forge, with Sindri working the magic and Brokkr manning the bellows. The fire had to be maintained at precise temperature. Too hot or too cold, and the magic would fail. It was grueling, precise work, and Loki knew it, so he did what Loki does. He cheated, transforming himself into a gadfly. He buzzed around the forge, looking for an opportunity to sabotage the brothers' work. First, they placed a pigskin in the forge. The fly bit Brokkr's hand, but the dwarf, gritting his teeth, kept the bellows pumping. From the fire came Gullinbursti, the golden boar whose bristles shone like sunlight, and who could run faster than any horse through air, water, or land. A gift for Freyr, god of fertility and harvest. Next, they placed gold in the forge. The fly bit Brokkr's neck, hard enough to draw blood, but still the dwarf maintained his rhythm. From the flames came Draupnir, a golden ring that would drip 8 new rings of equal weight every 9th night, an endless source of wealth. A gift for Odin, who valued such symbols of power and prosperity. Finally, they placed iron in the forge. Sindri warned his brother that this was the most delicate work yet, that any interruption could ruin everything. Loki, in fly form, knew this was his last chance. He landed on Brokkr's eyelid and bit down with all his might, so hard that blood streamed into the dwarf's eye, temporarily blinding him. For just a moment, just one breath, Brokkr released the bellows to wipe the blood away. It was enough. When Sindri drew the final creation from the forge, it was magnificent. Mjolnir, the hammer of hammers, a weapon that would never miss its target, that would always return to its wielder's hand, that could level mountains with its strikes. But the handle was shorter than intended, just slightly too short for a man to wield comfortably with 2 hands. Sindri lamented the flaw, but both brothers knew they had still created something extraordinary. They traveled to Asgard, where the gods would judge which set of treasures was superior. Loki presented his gifts: the golden hair that would grow on Sif's head, restoring her beauty, and Thor's honor, Gungnir, which Odin tested and found unerring, Skidbladnir, which Freyr marveled at, as it folded impossibly small. Then, Brokkr and Sindri presented theirs, Gullinbursti, whose speed and light would aid Freyr in his journeys, Draupnir, which would make Odin's treasury inexhaustible, and Mjolnir, which despite its shortened handle proved to be the most devastating weapon the gods had ever seen. Thor gripped it with one hand, and thunder rolled across the heavens. The gods conferred, and their verdict was unanimous. Mjolnir alone outweighed all other treasures, for it would be their greatest defense against the giants who constantly threatened to unmake the ordered world. Brokkr had won the wager. He approached Loki to claim his prize, the trickster's head. But Loki, ever clever, pointed out that, while Brokkr could take his head, the wager said nothing about his neck. If Brokkr harmed Loki's neck to take his head, he would be breaking the terms of their agreement. Furious but acknowledging the logic, Brokkr settled for a different punishment. He sewed Loki's lips shut with an awl and thong. For once, the trickster's silver tongue was silenced, at least until the leather rotted away. This story reveals something crucial about the dwarves. They create not for love of gods or devotion to cosmic order, but because creation is their nature, and because they demand proper respect for their craft. The gods need them desperately. Without dwarvish skill, Odin would have no spear, Thor no hammer, Freyr no ship or boar. The entire divine arsenal, the very tools that maintain cosmic order against the chaos of giants, came from hands that worked in darkness, from minds that understood transformation at levels even gods could not grasp. But dwarvish creations do not always bring blessing. Sometimes they bring only curse. And no tale demonstrates this better than the story of Andvari and his fatal gold. Andvari was a dwarf of unusual gifts, possessing the ability to transform himself into a pike, which allowed him to dwell beneath a waterfall in a hidden grotto. There, in that secret place, he had accumulated a vast hoard of treasure, gold beyond counting, magical armor including the fearsome helm of awe, and most precious of all, a gold ring called Andvaranaut, which had the power to attract more gold to itself, ensuring Andvari's wealth would only grow. He lived there in solitude, guarding his hoard, harming no one, desiring nothing but to increase his collection. His peaceful existence ended when the gods came calling, specifically, when they came demanding payment for a crime. The Volsunga saga tells us that Odin, Loki, and Ymir were traveling when they encountered an otter by a waterfall. Loki, acting on impulse, killed the creature with a stone and skinned it, proud of the fine pelt. The three gods sought shelter that night at the hall of Hreidmar, a dwarf king who practiced magic. When they showed him the otter skin, Hreidmar's face went white with rage. They had killed his son Otter, who possessed the ability to shapeshift into an otter. Hreidmar and his remaining sons, Fafnir and Regan, seized the gods and demanded Vorgild, blood price for the slain son. The otter skin had to be filled with gold and completely covered in treasure until not one hair was visible. Odin agreed, and Loki was sent to find enough wealth to pay the blood debt. And Loki, knowing of Andvari's hoard, set out to rob the dwarf. Using a magical net borrowed from the sea goddess Ran, Loki caught Andvari in his pike form and dragged him from the water. The dwarf, powerless against the trickster god, watched as Loki ransacked his grotto, taking every piece of gold, every gem, every treasure Andvari had accumulated. When it seemed all was taken, Andvari tried to keep just one thing, the ring, Andvaranaut, which he clutched tightly in his fist. But Loki pried even this from his fingers, leaving the dwarf with absolutely nothing. In that moment, stripped of everything he had built across centuries, Andvari spoke a curse. The words varied slightly between tellings, but their essence remained. Whoever possessed the gold, and especially the ring, would know only misery and death. The treasure that had brought him such satisfaction would bring all future owners only ruin. Loki, unconcerned with the ravings of a powerless dwarf, hauled the treasure back to Hreidmar's hall. The curse activated immediately when the otter skin was filled and covered with Andvaranaut used to cover the final visible whisker. Hreidmar's heart changed. Where before he had mourned his son, now he saw only gold. His remaining sons, Fafnir and Regan, watched their father's transformation into a miser who guarded the gold obsessively, denying even his own blood any claim to it. The corruption worked quickly. Fafnir murdered his father in his sleep and claimed the entire hoard for himself. So consumed was he by greed and paranoia that he transformed into a dragon, a serpent of enormous size who coiled around the treasure and breathed poison into the air, ensuring no one could approach. The curse rippled outward from there. Regan survived but became fixated on reclaiming the gold, eventually manipulating the hero Sigurd into slaying his brother Fafnir. Sigurd took the treasure, including the cursed ring, and eventually gave it to the shield maiden Brynhild. When Sigurd later married Gudrun and gave her the ring instead, Brynhild's heartbreak and rage led to Sigurd's assassination. Gudrun wore the ring when she married Atli, Attila the Hun in some versions, and the curse drew her brothers into Atli's trap, resulting in their deaths. Everywhere the gold went, death followed. Families splintered, kingdoms fell, heroes died in betrayal and blood. Scholars have long noted the philosophical depth of this tale. Andvari's curse isn't magical in the sense of spellcraft. It's more fundamental than that. The curse is the nature of gold itself when hoarded, when made the sole focus of desire. The ring doesn't create greed. It reveals the greed that already exists in human hearts, amplifying it until it destroys every bond of kinship, honor, and love. In this sense, Andvari is less villain than tragic prophet, a dwarf who understood that what had brought him lonely satisfaction could only bring others mutual destruction. J.R.R. Tolkien, deeply versed in Norse mythology, drew heavily on this tale when crafting The Lord of the Rings. The One Ring's corrupting influence, its ability to turn even good-hearted beings toward possessive madness, echoes Anvaranaut, the dragon, Smaug hoarding stolen gold in lonely mountains, recalls Fafnir. The cycle of ownership and tragedy mirrors the cascade of deaths in the Volsunga saga. Tolkien understood that the Norse saw something profound in this myth, that wealth without purpose or generosity becomes a curse that destroys its possessor, and that the desire for treasure can literally make monsters of men. The dwarf, in creating and then losing and finally cursing his treasure, embodies the dangerous relationship between creator and creation. His work, that beautiful, magically attracting gold, became the instrument of his ruin and countless others. It asks uncomfortable questions. Is the craftsman responsible for how his creations are used? Does intention matter when the result is catastrophe? Can beautiful things be inherently corrupting? These are questions without easy answers, which is precisely why the tale has endured for over a millennium. But dwarvish vulnerability extends beyond their emotional attachments to their creations. They possess a physical weakness so fundamental, it shapes every aspect of their existence. They cannot survive sunlight. The rays of the sun, which bring life and warmth to the realms of men and gods, are fatal to creatures born from the rotting flesh of a primordial giant. Touch a dwarf with daylight, and he turns to stone, instantly, permanently, completely. This isn't metaphor or magical curse, it's simply their nature, a consequence of their subterranean birth. The most famous tale of this vulnerability involves a dwarf named Alvis, all-wise, whose name was well-earned. He possessed knowledge that rivaled even the most learned of gods, understanding the true names and nature of all things across the 9 realms. And he had been promised the hand of Thrud, Thor's daughter, in marriage. The other gods had agreed to this match during Thor's absence on some adventure, seeing it as a fair exchange for services the dwarf had rendered. When Alvis came to claim his bride, however, Thor had returned, and the thunder god was less than pleased to discover his daughter had been promised to a dwarf. Thor, disguised in travel-worn clothes and covered in road dust, intercepted Alvis at his hall's entrance. The dwarf, not recognizing the god, saw only a scruffy stranger blocking his path. When Alvis explained he had come to claim his bride, Thor insulted him, saying he looked like death itself, pale as a corpse, a thing that had slept in a grave mound. Alvis, proud and offended, declared that he had every right to marry Thrud, that the gods themselves had promised her to him. Thor revealed his identity then, and made it clear no daughter of his would marry a dwarf unless that dwarf could prove himself worthy by demonstrating the legendary dwarvish wisdom. Alvis, confident in his knowledge and desperate to win his bride, agreed to any test, and Thor began asking questions. Endless questions about how different beings named common things. What do men call the earth? What do gods call it? What do elves call it? What do giants? What do dwarves? What do the Vanir call it? Each question required 6 answers, one for each major race of beings in the cosmos. What do they call the sky? What do they call fire? What do they call wind, sea, forest, night, seed, barley? Alvis answered every question flawlessly, demonstrating knowledge so comprehensive it humbled even Thor. The dwarf explained that men call the earth ground, gods call it the plains, Vanir call it the weaver of winds, giants call it the evergreen, elves call it the growing, and dwarves call it the mire. He continued through every question with equal precision, his voice growing more animated as he displayed his learning, forgetting everything except his pride in his vast knowledge and his desire to prove himself worthy. Thor kept asking questions, kept drawing out Alvis's detailed answers, kept the dwarf talking through the night, and when the first rays of dawn began to creep over the mountains, Thor pointed and said simply, "The sun rises." Alvis, in the middle of explaining some intricate distinction, turned to look, and the light touched him. In an instant, all-wise became stone, frozen mid-sentence, his mouth still open with unspoken words, his face caught between pride and the dawning horror of understanding what had happened. Thor had tricked him, used his pride in his knowledge as a weapon against him, kept him distracted until the light could do what no hammer blow could accomplish. The petrified Alvis supposedly stands still somewhere outside Thor's hall, an eternal monument to the danger of pride and the cruel cleverness of gods. But There's another reading of this tale that's less comfortable. Thor used the dwarf's physical vulnerability, something Alvis couldn't control, a consequence of how the gods themselves had shaped his race, as a weapon to break a promise other gods had made. The test was rigged from the start, a fraud disguised as a challenge. Alvis did prove himself worthy by any reasonable standard, demonstrating knowledge that impressed even the god of thunder. But it didn't matter because Thor never intended to honor the agreement. The dwarf's wisdom, his learning, his patient answering of every question, all of it was meaningless in the face of biological vulnerability and divine bad faith. This reveals something crucial about how the Norse viewed dwarves. They admired dwarvish skill and knowledge, valued dwarvish creations, but maintained a fundamental conviction that dwarves were lesser beings whose claims and desires ultimately didn't matter when they conflicted with divine prerogatives. The dwarves exist in a space of permanent second-class status despite, or perhaps because of, being essential to cosmic order. They make the tools that preserve the world, yet they're denied full participation in that world. They're kept in darkness, used when needed, dismissed or tricked when their desires conflict with those of gods and heroes. This brings us to perhaps the most complex aspect of dwarvish existence: their moral ambiguity. Unlike many mythological races who are clearly good or evil, dwarves occupy a space of profound moral complexity. They create Mjolnir, which protects the cosmos from giants. But they also create cursed gold that destroys families across generations. They forge Gungnir for Odin, but also demand prices and bargains that sometimes border on exploitation. They're neither heroes nor villains, but something more interesting: craftsmen whose creations can save or damn, depending on how they're used and who uses them. Consider the story of Freyja's necklace, Brisingamen. 4 dwarves, Alfrig, Dvalin, Berling, and Grer, created a necklace of such surpassing beauty that Freyja, goddess of love and beauty herself, was overcome with desire for it. She offered them gold, silver, anything they asked, but the dwarves named a different price. She would spend 1 night with each of them, 4 nights total, in exchange for the necklace. Freyja, though a goddess, agreed, spending 4 nights in the dwarvish halls before claiming her prize. The dwarves weren't forcing her. She could have walked away, but they also knew the power their creation held over her desire and used that leverage to extract an intimate price from a goddess who presumably had many other options for obtaining any typical treasure. Is this exploitation? Business? A meeting of mutual needs? The sagas don't moralize about it, presenting it simply as what happened. But it speaks to the transactional nature of many dwarf-god relationships, the sense that dwarves approach even interactions with divine beings as crafters approach their work, with an eye toward fair exchange, proper compensation, getting value for value. They don't worship the gods who visit their forges. They negotiate with them. This puts them in a unique position in Norse cosmology. Beings who are neither divine nor mortal, who serve the gods without being subject to them in the way humans are. Their knowledge extended beyond metalwork into stranger territories. Several sources mention dwarves as masters of runes, those symbols that held power over fate itself. They understood Galdr, the magic of chanting and singing, and Cedar, the sorcerous practices usually associated with Odin and Freyja. In some versions of the creation of the mead of poetry, that liquid which granted divine inspiration and eloquence, dwarves played a dark role. 2 brothers, Fjalar and Galar, murdered the wise being Kvasir, who had been formed from the combined spit of the Aesir and Vanir when they made peace. They drained his blood, mixed it with honey, and created the mead of poetry, which they then used as leverage in various schemes until it was eventually claimed by Odin. The dwarves in this tale are outright murderers, yet their crime produces something of immense value to gods and men. The source of all poetic inspiration, all eloquent speech, all divine poetry. When Ragnarok comes, the twilight of the gods, the end of all things, the dwarves' role in the prophesied events is remarkably minimal for beings of such importance. Voluspa mentions that the dwarves groan before their doors of stone. As the cosmic order begins to collapse, but they're not listed among the warriors on either side of the final battle. They don't fight for gods or giants. They simply endure in their underground halls while the world burns above them. Perhaps this is fitting. Craftsmen of wonders have no place in Ragnarok's wholesale destruction. Or, perhaps it suggests the dwarves, having witnessed gods and giants struggle since creation, see the futility in choosing sides in a conflict that will consume everyone regardless. Yet, there's a curious detail about Ragnarok that involves dwarves. After the fire and flood, when the world is reborn and the surviving gods return, it's said that Mjolnir will be found and wielded by Thor's sons, Magni and Modi, to establish justice in the new world. A dwarf-forged weapon survives the death of Cosmos and becomes a symbol of the renewed order. The craftsman's work outlasts the craftsman's masters, which may be the most fitting legacy of all. The question of whether dwarves and dark elves are identical or distinct is one of the most debated in Norse scholarship. The sources use the terms almost interchangeably at times. When gods need magical items forged, they travel to Svartalfheim, which literally means black elf home. Yet it's clearly dwarves who do the forging. Some scholars argue they're the same beings with two names. Others suggest dwarves and dark elves are related but distinct races sharing the same territory. The fact that we can't definitively resolve this question after more than 1,000 years of scholarship perhaps reveals something profound. The Norse themselves might not have drawn sharp boundaries between different types of underground beings. To surface dwellers, all the crafty, dangerous, brilliant beings who lived in the dark were part of the same category of existence. Other, essential, never fully trusted. So what did the dwarves represent to the Norse who told these stories? They embodied the transformation of raw matter into tools of power, the alchemy of craft that makes civilization possible. They represented knowledge hidden in the earth, both literal, the gems and metals buried underground, and metaphorical, the secrets of creation itself. They stood for the uncomfortable truth that civilization depends on those it considers lesser, that the tools of divine power come from darkness, that the price of wonders might be higher than anyone wants to pay. They also represented the dangerous nature of skill itself. A master craftsman can create weapons or wealth with equal ease, can forge tools of protection or curse-bearing rings without moral distinction. The craft is the same, the skill identical, the outcome dependent entirely on purpose and luck. In a culture that valued skill as highly as the Norse did, the dwarves served as a reminder that talent without wisdom, creation without responsibility, can produce disaster as easily as deliverance. Their confinement to underground spaces suggests something about how the Norse viewed the foundational work of civilization. The surface world of farms and halls, raids and poetry, that's where humans and gods lived their visible lives. But that life rested on hidden labor, on work done in darkness by beings most would never see. The ore extracted from deep mines, the metalwork that required hours at forges in cramped underground smithies, the knowledge of geology and metallurgy that built weapons and tools, all of it happened in dwarf space, in the liminal zones between rock and not rock, between raw material and finished creation. Modern fantasy, influenced by Tolkien and Dungeons and Dragons, often depicts dwarves as jovial, brave warriors who fight alongside other good races against evil. This would be almost unrecognizable to a Norse storyteller. The original dwarves were neither comedic nor reliably heroic. They were dealers in wonders, yes, but also in curses. They could be tricked, but they would exact revenge for insults to their craft. They created the hammer that protected the cosmos from chaos, but they also cursed gold that tore families apart across generations. They were necessary, essential, brilliant, dangerous, and fundamentally other. Creatures who shared the world with gods and humans, but would never fully be part of either divine or mortal society. Their legacy endures not in the sanitized fantasy versions, but in the core insight they represent. Creation is morally neutral. The same skills that make a ring can make a sword. The same knowledge that protects can curse. The same hands that forge Mjolnir forge Andvaran out. The craftsman doesn't control how the world uses his work, yet somehow remains responsible for what he unleashes. This is the burden of creation, The weight that the dwarves of Norse mythology carry on their backs, along with Ymir's skull, a weight of knowing that every wonder you create might become an instrument of doom, and crafting it anyway because creation is your nature. And to refuse to create would be to deny the fundamental spark the gods kindled in the maggot flesh so long ago in the corpse of the first being. The dwarves began as something disgusting, worms in rotting meat, and transformed themselves into the most essential craftsmen in all creation. That transformation, from corruption to art, from base matter to transcendent creation, is perhaps the most dwarvish thing of all. They prove that origin doesn't determine destiny, that brilliance can emerge from the most unlikely sources, that those who dwell in darkness can illuminate the world with the products of their labor, even if they can never walk safely in the light they help others see by. As the cosmic clock winds toward Ragnarok, as the mechanisms of fate continue to turn on wheels forged in underground smithies, the dwarves remain in their halls beneath the mountains. They keep working, they keep crafting, because in the end, that's what dwarves do. They transform, create, and endure. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the often overlooked craftsmen of Norse mythology, make sure to like this video and subscribe to History Scrolls TV for more mythological explorations that go beyond the surface stories into the complex philosophical and cultural meanings beneath them. The myths are deeper than we usually realize, and there's always another layer to uncover.